Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everybody. We'll get right into it. My name's Brendan. Hello, hello, hello. Just checking the sound. Hello, everybody. We'll get right into it. My name's Brendan. Hello, hello, hello. Just checking the sound. Hello, everybody. We'll first stream on this account. My name's Brendan. Hello, hello, we're gonna do some news. Just checking the sound. Hello, everybody. We'll first stream on this account. My name's Brendan. Hello, hello, we're gonna do some news. Just checking the sound. Hello, everybody. We're I'm not getting any. My name's Brendan. Hello, hello, we're gonna do some news. Just checking the sound. Hello, everybody. I'm not getting any. My name's Brendan. Hello, hello, do some news. Just checking the sound. Hello, everybody. I'm not getting any. My name's Brendan. Okay, I heard myself way too many times. Now we can mute it. Well, hello, everybody. It's Monday morning in what seems to be hell. Although the birds are singing and the plants are still growing and the sun is still shining, so how can it be? How bad can it be, really? But this particular location, it happens to be good. However, the apocalypse is unfolding quite steadily and readily in many different places. If you look, we in the West have the ability to come out and speculate whether or not the world will end when we are actually in the center of the evil empire destroying the world everywhere but where we stand. Well, everywhere that doesn't fall right in line, that is. So without further ado, I was going to jump over to the desktop layout and start with some breaking points.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed we do. We've got a taco alert from Trump this morning, and as you know, we are pro-taco on this show.
Very pro-taco.
Yeah, so Trump is trying to back down from some of his threats against Iran. The Iranians, though, are disputing some of the claims that he is making. There's a lot to dig into there. Trita Parsi is going to join us to help to make sense of what the hell is going on this morning. At the same time, Lindsey Graham, of course, pushing for a ground invasion and making a jaw-dropping comparison to what it could be like. There have been dueling strikes near nuclear facilities. That seems like a troubling development. The U.S. is rolling back sanctions on Iranian oil as prices at the pump continue to go up. Bibi claims Iran is targeting near Al-Aqsa Mosque in a very ominous development there. And really excited to have this morning Lawrence Wilkerson joining us. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but very, very important figure, both currently but also throughout history. He was the chief of staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell. He became a prominent Iraq war critic and is incredibly knowledgeable and very insightful about military affairs, about foreign affairs. So really looking forward to getting to speak with him.
Yeah, I mean, Wilkerson was like the Joe Kent, really, of his time. One of the earliest people who was in the administration after Colin Powell, I guess, left office, after W was elected, right in '05 when it was not easy to speak out against Iraq. He came forward. I remember reading and listening to so many of his interviews. So it was a real honor.
Yeah,
to be able
someone
to
I very much admire. So looking forward to getting to
Thank you to everybody who's been supporting the show. We really appreciate it. We had that big interview with Joe Kent over the weekend. We used a lot of our premium subscriber questions. So seriously, thank you. You guys submitted so many
We came in at the
questions,
intro,
which I used a ton of. So
they're doing the
thank you all,
housekeeping.
seriously,
Stand by.
breakingpoints.com if you want to be able to support our show. And we're, of course, doing our AMA live later on today. But with that, let's get to the topic.
We love you, Sagar.
I'm a little bit biased, but I thought your interview was the best of the Joe Kent interviews.
It's very kind of you. I'm much harder on myself. If one of our premiums had done it, I think they would have done a good job. It made some news, and I guess that's all you can do. So I'm glad we were able to do it.
It was very important and newsworthy, and I think you pressed him also in the right point.
Tried my best.
Hold on, some context here. Let's ship over really quick to the reason why I highlighted this morning so far is this little thing. Trump claims direct talks underway with Iran. Tehran denies. And so Axios had said President Trump told reporters his envoys had been negotiating with a senior Iranian official and claimed the parties were in agreement on many points, why it matters. Regional leaders in global markets were bracing for major escalation on Monday, but Trump walked back his threat to strike Iran's power plants, citing productive negotiations. And Iran again is like, we didn't talk to you once. I don't know what you're talking about. So this is a pattern of the administration saying, "Wait, we're doing the thing. We're talking business. We're talking peace," and the people we're bombing are like, "I don't know what the heck you're talking about. You actually killed the people you might negotiate with." And so it's kind of difficult on top of the fact that you're crazy. You killing us. And but an Israeli official told Axios that U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner had been in touch with the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. So, and then some people say war is God's way of teaching Americans geography. Also, other languages, other names of people that speak other languages. So apologies if I mess it up. Trump did not name the Iranian interlocutor, saying he did not want to get him killed, but claimed that U.S. from U.S. or Israeli airstrikes, not just the Iranians. Like fucking everything that comes out of this man's mouth. Say he didn't want to claim the U.S. and Iran were aligned on many of the key issues. The intrigue. We are dealing with a man that I believe is the most respected, not the supreme leader, but we have not heard from him. Trump's, is that a sentence? I'm not sure if that's a sentence. He's just screaming in the void at this point. Trump said the talks would continue over the phone on Monday, with a possible in-person meeting later on. They're just basically trying to save the markets, because this is an Armageddon for the markets. The Israeli officials said the mediating countries were trying to convene a meeting in Islamabad, with Ghalibaf and other officials representing Tehran, and Witkoff, Kushner, and possibly Vice President Vance representing the U.S., possibly later this week. Possibly. We might maybe meet with them after bombing all week and seeing how many of them we can kill and threaten and gesticulate toward some sort of solution while we are literally killing the people we might negotiate with. So the official said, I'm open-minded to the idea that this stuff works out, but everything I've seen so far indicates otherwise, and every single time that we drop our guard cooler heads prevailing, the adults are in the room, then it's basically a lie, and it turns out that it's actually much, 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 much worse than anybody had reckoned. I'm not saying it's an outright, it's impossible to say if it's an outright lie or they're telling the truth and it's not what they think, or they're overstating the truth. It's impossible at this point. Someday we will have the records. We will be able to look, hopefully, and God, if we actually get an administration back that is, beholden to the law, we will be able to look at these records and see important things like, was there actually a phone call? Look at the call logs and see if these things were happening or if they were just blustering. So Ghalibaf is he's like, I don't want to name him, but somebody else leaks the name, so it's like, we'll just have to see if this guy ends up dead in the next week from an Israeli drone strike or something. It's very common. I wish I was joking. Killing the negotiators before they can negotiate is a very common strategy these days in our occupied government. That's not to say that that's selling the U.S. short. The U.S. is perfectly capable of orchestrating and executing its own genocides with or without a scapegoat. But it does seem like something about the injection of settler colonialist mindsets into Israel such a long time ago, and the rampantness of Zionism has come to reinfect the United States and vice versa. It's a two-parted relationship. It's an incestuous relationship of imperialism and settler colonialism. So don't sell either of them short. They're both equally capable of their own devastation, with Israel a little bit more willing and able to publicly do and say much, much, much worse things than the United States is willing to publicly do and say. Less embarrassment as such. The U.S. is still attempting to put a nice face on these absolute atrocities, unforgivable atrocities, as they change the Department of Defense to the Department of War and so on. But I digress. And digress and digress. The Hormuz crisis has become a key issue, driving a global energy crisis, preventing Trump from ending war. Yes. And they're basically making him suffer because he just, every time it's politically expedient, domestically or internationally, they just launch war. That's what's going on. And Iran is sick of it. Based on the tenor and tone, all caps Trump Truth Social. Based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which will he misspelled which will continue throughout the week. That's how you know it's him. It's all caps and there's spelling mistakes. And constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week. I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period. Aren't I so nice? Subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. But those discussions are not successful and nobody does what I want. We're going to start up the bombs like as soon as like this weekend. I'm serious. Let's see. Mafia boss. Breaking it down, Trump later made several claims, none of which have been confirmed by Tehran, about points of agreement. Starts a fire and then turns over to the news and says, markets, you can quit collapsing. We've got this in hand. I sent them a strongly worded email. Iran not to pursue nuclear weapons or to enrich uranium and to hand it. That's a non-starter. Sorry, it's basically a done deal that you've made the nuclear weapons a surefire thing. And before you say oh no, they shouldn't have it, I agree. Nuclear proliferation should be a goal. However, to say that certain countries now should and shouldn't have them when the ones that do and are apparently running the global structure are so bad and being so awful in every single way imaginable. Who's calling who a rogue nation? And also, we all saw what happened to Gaddafi when he turned in his nukes. He was sodomized with the bayonet by his own people, and we did nothing to make sure that his regime stayed intact in any way so whatsoever. And that country Libya is a failed state with open slave markets, and it's not pretty in that country. And it seems like we're trying to do something similar here and balkanize it. That's not saying the Iranian regime is great by any means. It's actually quite terrible and brutal and really, really awful. But it's complicated. And if you're going to pick a fight with the country, you should understand it. And for better or worse. And these people do not bother to understand like anything. They understand killing and domination, and that's it. This is a complex situation, and it involves numerous participants and macroeconomics, and it's a Fabergé egg, and they're just taking a hammer to it, expecting this to stay intact. It's not, and it's broken now. And now we're picking up the pieces. So the old war is broken, the hegemony is broken, and nobody trusts the U.S. to run their empire anymore. And essentially the U.S. empire is over. It's just going through its death throes physically. It's paper tiger, and yes, physically it can do a lot, but can it actually manage the complex reality of the world now? I don't think so. And even that giant military is somewhat of a liability, because a lot of it's pork. Like, it's just like money on paper. It doesn't necessarily get us more drones or more stuff or more soldiers or any of it. It's deeply inefficient. And, when they were running Doge, of all the things that they should have looked into but didn't, it was the Department of Defense, where the pork really exists. All the civilian programs are forced to be as efficient as possible and sign everything in triplicate. Hella bureaucracy, but the Pentagon is just like, oh yeah, $50 for a box of pencils, sure, why not? That sounds logical. Just throw it on the pile. The money we're burning. That's just the big money burning pile. So I'm done. I'm done listening to this. This is basically just straight from the feed trough. Let's see.
Joe will, I believe he's going to be on the Sean Ryan show today. So maybe something interesting will come out from there. But yeah, Taco.
All right, let's get to the taco. Let's put this up on the screen from Trump over on Truth Social. He says, I am pleased to report the United States of America and the country of Iran have had, over the last 2 days, very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East, based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which, he spelled it like a witch, like on Halloween, but anyway, which will continue throughout the week. I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. Thank you for your attention in this matter, President Donald J. Trump. All right, let's go ahead and put a 0B up on the screen if we have that. So Iran already coming out and saying, bullshit, we are not talking to him whatsoever. He said, this says from Iran Now, a high-ranking source in the Iranian Foreign Ministry to Iran Now. We deny what U.S. President Donald Trump said regarding negotiations taking place between the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran adheres firmly to its position, rejecting any type of negotiations before achieving Iran's goals from the war. Trump's statements represent a retreat from his previous threats, but the Islamic Republic of Iran remains steadfast in all its declared positions. Iran's position on the Strait of Hormuz has not changed, and the strait will remain closed to aggressors against the Islamic Republic and its people. So let's back up for a second and talk about how we got here. So Trump had previously threatened that Iran had 48 hours to open the Strait of Hormuz, or else Trump was going to attack their electrical grid. This is a war crime, not that anyone apparently cares about such things, but it is pretty wild to see a president of the United States just like openly announcing their intention to commit war crimes. But in any case, that occurred. You then had, Iran saying, all right, well, if you do that, in response, we are going to attack infrastructure throughout.
Yeah, that is collective punishment and fits the definition of genocide under the Geneva Convention, but I digress.
the region. Obviously, the Gulf Arab states are very vulnerable both to attacks on their electrical grid. Israel is actually quite vulnerable to attacks on its electrical grid, not to mention if desalination plants get involved, that is a whole other level of escalation. So mutual threats were made, the clock was ticking, and now you have, and one more piece.
Can we just stop for a second and reflect on how much the baseline has changed? Because if in any other context, at any other time, in any other war, if we were talking about the United States was going to bomb desalination plants, power plants, right? Real infrastructure that people need, and knowing that thousands of people, if not millions of people, will suffer as a result of this. This is the kind of shit that we would say that Saddam Hussein or something is doing so that we had justification to fucking invade, right? And now because of Gaza and because of everything, because of who is actually running things, we are discussing whether or not we will do these things to punish a foreign country to control their economy and their lifeblood, their oil supply. All other reasons, ostensible reasons aside. The fucking depravity of it all. And don't forget that. This is not normal.
Iran also said, hey, by the way, any financial institutions that are holding U.S. treasuries, we consider them to be targets as well. Market saga, of course, were looking very dire. Oil prices were going up. Bond yields were going up. That might even be more of a threat to the U.S. economy and the U.S. government than the oil prices. The market was crashing. The futures were down. And so between all of these combination of things, Trump felt the need to come out and say, well, let's give it a few days.
Yes.
Let's hold back.
Well, let's look at the timing of it. The timing of it was very important. 7 a.m. Eastern time on a Monday morning, which means what? The S&P futures are rocketing. Oil was down some 10% or so on the initial news. We have no idea. It's gone up a little bit more after the Iranians rejected the idea that there were any sort of direct talks. But this 5-day stretch, which conveniently is the entire time that the entire market is open, is going to be one where he's trying to calm the waters. Initially, spot prices on gasoline, the way that things work is that when oil prices come down, that means in about 2 to 3 days, we should also begin to see some of the gas prices go down. He is looking for that billboard flashing all across America. He wants to see people see a reduction in the gas price. However, a couple things before we bring in Trita Parsi, which are very important to note. The word Israel was not mentioned once in the entire Trump taco truth, right? Israel may continue to do strikes. We have no idea what Bibi Netanyahu and others have agreed to. Who knows whether, they've decided what strike packages they're going to move on forward. Don't forget, we're going to spend a significant time on this on the show. They took a beating over the last 72 hours. Their interceptors are failing. Their nuclear strikes or nuclear facilities were struck. They had a mass casualty event in southern Israel. Israel is not doing well right now so far in this war. Also, there are thousands of U.S. forces that are still converging on the Persian Gulf and in the Middle East. So all of the current signs, remember, none of that has yet been called off. All of the current roads still.
Yeah, they definitely got a bloody nose out of this, just wandering around like a drunken sailor trying to punch everybody in the face is not a great strategy for making friends. And also, just in terms of the number of interceptor missiles, there are serious limitations to this. And I do believe in the last round, Iran, who is acting strategically, who is acting like they have limitations and guardrails and strategy. In the last round, they looked at the way these things work. They looked at the radar systems, and this time they hit a number of the different installations that feed this full spectrum dominance sort of collective information ecosystem that allows such transparency and feeds all these data points into, our heads-up displays for our tracking systems, for the people piloting the drones, for the people doing strategy and doing war games at the Pentagon and all this, as well as, feeding that information into the Iron Dome and these interceptor systems. Now, if those sensors go offline, the quality of the inputs drop, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So what you're seeing is the result of both supply shortages from the bloat, from the absolute insane overdevelopment and over pricing of the U.S. Military industrial complex, defense industrial base, and all this. We're seeing that coupled with the slow death of 1,000 cuts of the so-called, impenetrable force field that they were projecting. That they were, they have all these euphemisms for Golden Dome, Iron Dome, all of this. That it's still a physical system, and it does depend on reliability. And right now, it seems like they're desperately trying to peel back the onion. They're trying to roll back the clock so that they can have time to reload and reprovision these systems. And Iran is not going to let that happen. They're just not. That's not in the cards for them. It's existential. They're not going to let this just go back to business as usual so that they can reprovision and reload and just start up again in a month's time, in 2 months' time, once they have the guns loaded again. And this is the thing. The same with Gaza situation. This is the way the West does war now, is occasionally punishes a country, smaller country that's out of line. But, they can't pull this, what they pulled with Iran or Iraq, and what they pulled with Gaza, what they pulled with Lebanon and all these other countries. They're trying to do the same strategy with Iran. And Iran is just not going to take it. They're going to make the system suffer as a result of the hubris. As they say, pride cometh before the fall. And we're all falling. And where does this, it comes home in the terms of like rising prices, absolute hyperinflation as the fiat dollar system that we've, our dollar is what we say it's worth because we say so. And if you don't agree, we will blow you out of the water. Essentially, that system is collapsing. And it's based on bonds and the willingness of other countries and brokers around the world and in the United States, an ability to buy our bonds. And if they don't, our word is our bond and our bond is our word. And if we break our word, we'll break the bond. A lot of play on words there, but essentially it's if we are breaking the contract we had with the world to be safe, stable stewards of the economy, and now it's breaking around us. So, yep.
Lead to a widening of the war. And then last and most importantly, before we get to Trita Parsi, which people really need to remember, and I've spoken and now confirmed this with multiple security forces, or security sources, what the Iranians believe more than anything is that the Ayatollah made a grave mistake by agreeing to that ceasefire in the 12-day war. He was a very cautious, doddering old man. He's dead. We killed him, right, with the Israelis. The new Ayatollah and the existing security establishment, remember, the vast majority of their long existing heads, they're all dead. Everybody now is like, no, this is a fight to the death. We have to make sure that we survive. Most importantly, we will not give Israel and the United States time to rearm. We are not going to engage in fake diplomacy after you've bombed us twice in the middle of negotiations. We are not going to allow these U.S. forces to converge here while just allowing the U.S. off the hook in the interim. So diplomatic negotiations are going to have to be taken with a massive grain of salt inside of the country of Iran. We have to actually convince their security establishment that this time is different, which is why it was such a folly to bomb them twice under the cover of diplomatic negotiation in the first place. So all of those caveats, I think, are so important here at the top. This is in no way over. I really don't know why the Iranians would agree to it. I mean, listen, I hope they do. I really do. For all of our sakes, for their sakes, and for the world. I just don't see the strategic logic. And this is where Robert Papes and all of the escalation ladder analysis, like at a certain point, you're locked in a system of incentives which you created. And without that, I mean, absent a serious back down and effective surrender from the president, and then control over Israel, I don't see how this can end yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing we've been flagging for a while, is that Trump probably wants to taco at this point. He's probably looking for an off-ramp, thinking like, I don't know about this, the midterms are coming up, the gas prices are going up, this is not going great. He thought this would be over in 4 days. Genuinely.
They're going to send him to his knees. That's what they're doing.
Be it. That's what he was telling our allies, and I do think that is what he actually believed. So now he's lost, and he doesn't know where to go. I have no doubt that he would look for an off-ramp and some way to taco in a way that will save some kind of face and declare mission accomplished. The Iranians get a say.
See, the big difference between this and Venezuela, for example, where they were able to take out a single figurehead, remove him physically from the country, and they had people in his stead that they could work with. Whether or not you agree with how they did that, or if they have control of that situation, that all aside. Iran had plans in place to decentralize their government and to horizontally delegate different kinds of field command to all sorts of different leaders in their country. And so the U.S. thought, kill the head and the body dies, cut off the head of the snake. Well, this is a hydra. And now they're in a fight with the hydra. And boy, don't they wish that they'd paid a little bit more attention in Greek mythology class, because this is a mythological situation. This is the kind of thing that like parables are written about. And people would be talking about this for decades, if not centuries, not just because of the extremity and the severity in the stakes, but because of just the hubris and the absolute gall, the unmitigated gall. And this is a disaster, and it's his disaster, and it's perfect. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's perfect. It's a perfect disaster, like a perfect storm. And it couldn't be more perfect.
In that. And the Israelis, apparently, because we give them a say, they also get a say in it. And so the last thing that I'll note before we get to Trita is that overnight, actually, the Israelis struck in Tehran, and there were electrical outages. Now, there were blackouts reported. Now, we don't know whether they directly struck intentionally the electrical infrastructure or if the blackouts were just a side effect of strikes on other targets. But when I saw that this morning, I thought, oh boy, this could really be on from Iran. And then the news that came in right after that was the Trump taco. So one possibility here, too, is that Trump is sending Israel out like our little attack dog to go out and do our dirty work. And then he can, oh no, we want a ceasefire. We want to lessen the tensions here. We want to have productive negotiations, et cetera. So that could be part of what's going on here. But to Sagar's point, the Iranians they are not going to trust this president ever. All of the outreach that they were trying to do, according to Dropsite, reaching out via Witkoff, and him not having his text messages or his calls or whatever returned, there's an obvious reason for that. There's two reasons. Number one, because the diplomacy has always been a ruse and, given cover for future attacks, which I also think is something that could be going on here with this attempted taco too, to buy them some time and turn down the temperature until whatever the next phase is, which could potentially be a ground invasion. And there's a lot of signals pointing in that direction. So in any case, it could be a ruse. And the second point here is that the Iranians feel they must exact a lot of pain to make sure they do not end up here again. And I don't think that they feel they're anywhere close to getting the amount of pain in the American public and the global economy that would make them feel comfortable that it would be an effective deterrent in the future.
Right. All right, we have Trita Parsi standing by. Why don't we get to it?
All right, guys, joining us now for more, we have Trita Parsi, is Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Great to see you, Trita.
Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah, of course. So let's go ahead and put a 0 up on the screen. This is the big news this morning. A taco, or at least an attempted taco here from Trump. He says, "I'm pleased to report the United States of America and the country of Iran have had over the last 2 days very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East."
Again, this one's definitely his because of the all caps. I am pleased to report.
He then goes on to say that he is going to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period. What is your reaction to the president's truth here? What do you think is going on behind the scenes?
Look, this is a sign of someone who lost control over this war already 2.5 weeks ago. A lot of folks are saying, and I think quite correctly, that he realizes that this is a terrible thing for the markets. Yet he should have known that on Friday when he first issued that threat of bombing the Iranian power grids. I mean, if he's doing these things thinking the Iranians are going to back down, then he's learned absolutely nothing in the last 3 weeks. I've said it on this show before. Part of the reason why we're in this war is because he completely underestimated the resilience of the Islamic Republic, and he believed that just a small push would cause them to either collapse or to surrender. None of those things have happened. None of those things are likely to happen. Yet he keeps on issuing various kinds of threats and then backing down either fully or in a halfway. So, for instance, at Kharg Island, he struck the military installations, but not the oil, reflecting again how clearly he signals that he is extremely sensitive to what happens in the markets and why the Iranians then have such leverage over him because of the manner in which they can completely collapse all energy markets if he further escalates. He is someone who doesn't have any good escalatory options, but he's not willing yet to go down the path of truly exploring what some good off-ramps would be. And I hope that he does so very soon, because I fear that we will end up in a situation, perhaps in 2 weeks, perhaps in 3 weeks, in which those the escalatory options will no longer be available to him. Because for him to be able to de-escalate, he needs to form a narrative that still claims that he won and that his base then believes that he's won. But if he goes on for too long and it becomes absolutely clear that this is a freaking disaster, then his ability to convince his base that he actually walked out of this with a victory will start to wane. And at that point, unfortunately, his incentives to exit may actually decline compared to the incentives or the cost-benefit analysis of just continuing the war or actually escalating. So there's a very short window here in which he has to find that exit ramp. And that means that he's going to have to be willing not to just say that he talked to the Iranians, but actually put things on the table. And I think Joe Kent was absolutely right in saying there needs to be some sanctions relief in order to get out of this situation. And it can be done in a way that is actually quite good for the United States itself.
Dr. Parsi, something you have hammered home here is that the Iranians truly believe they made a massive mistake at the 12-day war, that they should have just kept firing. They never should have done a ceasefire. I see no reason why that logic doesn't remain today. The Ayatollah is now dead. He was one of the more cautious figures. Many of the so-called moderates or people who are willing to talk are also all dead. So the remaining security establishment, and perhaps the existing Ayatollah, they do not see this as a reasonable off-ramp. You keep talking about a possible one, but to me, it seems very unlikely because it would be effective surrender from a person who called for unconditional surrender. Sanctions relief at this point seems genuinely unthinkable from the Trump administration. But is that what it's actually going to take? What would it even look like?
I think that is what it will take. Look what the things that the Iranians have said that they need in order to back down. And I think some of them are unlikely. So, for instance, they're asking for all of the U.S. bases in the region to be closed down. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we can see a situation in which some of them may not be rebuilt and some of them may be slowly commissioned out. And some of these states may change their security approach in the sense that they will no longer ask for U.S. bases, but they will continue to buy a very large number of American weaponry. And that may actually be a smarter way for them to deal with their security issues rather than actually hosting bases that end up becoming targets and magnets for attacks. They've asked for reparations. I find that also extremely unlikely to happen. The thing that I think is not completely inconceivable is actually that there will be a level of sanctions relief. Now, I think the administration itself has already opened the door for this by claiming that, they're unsanctioned the oil on the water. Now, we know that they've done it in a strange way, but nevertheless, that is opening up the pathway for entering into that territory. I do worry about another thing, and you pointed out that the Iranians think that they committed a mistake, that they ended the war after 12 days, agreed to a ceasefire, when there were.
This is Charlie, by the way. She's a puppy. She's probably like 6 months old. Yes. Say hi, Charlie. Everybody say hi to Charlie.
Significant indications that the Israelis were running out of the Arrow 3s and that the Iranian missiles were just getting through at a higher and higher rate, even though they were shooting less of them.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is the Iranians may very well end up committing the very same mistake that the United States has committed, which is to overplay their hands in this war and not find the right moment to be able to strike a deal. And the objective has to be, from their standpoint, to create a new stable situation that is acceptable to them and it is acceptable to the GCC and ultimately to the United States as well. Just going on and on because you're winning without recognizing that you need to find an end state that is acceptable is not a smart strategy. And that's frankly what I believe the Trump administration is doing right now. So the Iranians have to find that moment as well. And again, as I said earlier on, that moment may be lost if they wait too long. Because if Trump cannot declare victory convincingly to his own base and he can't form that narrative, then his ability to exit this is going to become very, very difficult.
Yeah, that's a great point. I also wanted to get your reaction. So the Iranians are saying this is not true. There are no talks going on. We also have all these reports. We could put A10 up on the screen. We've got more Marines being sent into the region, thousands more Marines being sent into the region. This was another report from an Israeli source that says senior American officials have told their counterparts in Israel and other countries in recent days there will probably be no choice. The U.S. will be forced to launch a ground operation to capture the Iranian island of Karg, according to two sources familiar. We all know that at this point that 90% of the oil.
Isn't that just like, that sounds like it should be in Ireland or something, honestly. Like, Karg. What's the island's name? It's Karg. Like, it's like a fucking Klingon outpost. Freaking outpost asteroid or something like that. Sorry. We're gonna invade Karg. It just sounds so guttural, and I love it. I love it.
That's exported from Iran goes through Karg Island. Of course, there have been all kinds of reports in the U.S. press about potentially that or potentially an operation inside of mainland Iran to seize loose nuclear material. Is it possible that what Trump is doing here is not only a very obvious attempt to calm the markets, but is also another sort of ruse to get the Iranians to drop their guard while he prepares for this next phase of escalation?
It may very well be that is his intent. I don't see the Iranians lowering their guard in any way, shape, or form under these circumstances. I think they have now been burned so many times that they're not going to trust anything this administration says. And again, this is actually why they're requesting sanctions relief. Let me just explain a part of this that I think is very important to understand, why this, I think, is going to end up being non-negotiable from the Iranians, as long as they have leverage. If they lose the leverage, different story, obviously. From their standpoint, it is crucial, absolutely imperative, that this is the last war. This cannot end in a way in which the U.S. attacks Iran together with Israel in another 6 to 8 months. They're not going to accept or be able to survive if they end up becoming part of Israel's larger mowing the lawn strategy. The same thing they're doing against Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, but now on a much larger scale vis-a-vis Iran. Now, how do you then get to a situation in which you have a degree of confidence that you're not going to get attacked again? Are promises from the United States going to be sufficient? Is a non-aggression pact in and of itself going to be worth the paper that it is written on? I very much doubt that. Now, they will seek those different things, but that will not be sufficient in order for them to believe that they have managed to prevent future attacks. Rather, it's going to be two other things. One, they want this war to be as costly as possible so that it will simply be absolutely clear to the U.S. and to Israel that it is not worth restarting this. It was a mistake starting it. It will be a mistake restarting it. That's point number one. Point number two is that they need that sanctions relief to rebuild themselves. And rebuilding themselves is going to be essential in order to have the deterrence against the US and Israel attacking again. If they don't have sanctions relief, after this war, they will be in a state of continuous weakening. And it is precisely the perception of them being weak that created this false window of opportunity to attack Iran. So unless they get the sanctions relief so they can actually rebuild themselves and have a deterrence, they believe they will be attacked again. So I don't see them backing down from the point of asking for sanctions relief. It's not just because of economic reasons. It is because it is part of the thing that gives a non-aggression pact some actual basis and meat to it. And as a result, I just don't see them backing down from that point unless they lose their leverage, of course.
The other problem, sir, we have not talked about Israel once in this entire equation, and they are a huge, they precipitate much of the violence that's actually even been happening, some of the most egregious strikes. So how can the Iranians, frankly, how can even the Americans at this point, the people, have any faith that our government would restrain belligerent Israeli action in any sort of a deal? Like, if you're Iran, you don't just have to worry about the United States bombing you, you have to worry about Israel. And for example, we have a list of some of the demands that were circulating this weekend. Can we put, what is it, A7, please, up on the screen? So these are some of the demands that were going around this weekend of what some Iranian commitments they would have to agree to. No missile program for 5 years. I mean, that alone, imagine you're in a war and somebody says, hey, to end the war, you have to give up all your bullets for 5 years. They're like, well, maybe I'd be better off just firing all my bullets. Number two, zero uranium enrichment, decommissioning of nuclear reactors, arms control treaties with regional countries, no financing for regional proxies, strict outside observation protocols around the creation and use of a centrifuge, notably no word of sanctions relief. I mean, do you see any world where this country whose only reasonable deterrent is missiles would be even willing to give up their missiles for 5 years? Like, what could we possibly give them to do that?
This is absolutely not going to take place. And the intent behind these demands, I suspect that they actually originally come from Israel, is to make sure that there is no deal, just as much as zero enrichment and all of those different demands coming from the Israeli side were designed to make sure that they sabotage Trump's previous diplomacy and guaranteed war. This is a list of demands, at least the first 3 points, that are designed to make sure that there will be no ceasefire, there will be no end to the war, and the Israelis get what they're looking for, which is as prolonged war as possible in order to completely eliminate and destroy Iran's industrial base, to ensure that the balance of power shifts dramatically in Israel's direction, and that Israel will not have to worry about Iran ever posing a challenge to Israel's designs for hegemony for the next 3 to 4 decades. And to have that achieved regardless of what the cost is to the global economy, to the energy markets, to regional stability, and to Trump's presidency. That is the Israeli goal, and they will achieve that by putting forward demands that are completely non-starters.
I just wanted to ask you directly about this. So there's obviously two competing claims here this morning. Trump is saying, oh, these talks are ongoing and they're very constructive. And the Iranians are saying, we have no idea what you're talking about. There are no talks. We don't want any talks. Do you have any insight, or what would be your instinct of who is telling the truth there in that exchange?
I know in previous instances in which the administration said that there were no talks, that there were talks, and the Iranians said that there were no talks, that the administration was not being truthful there, that there were actually no. Now, the administration may have sent messages, they never got any responses. They may define talks as them talking, but reality is that there were no responses from the Iranian side. And I don't believe that there have been any responses on this in this specific instance either. But I want to go back to what I said earlier on. I do worry, however, that the Iranians may also at some point overplay their hands and not recognize the moment in which they need to cash in on whatever leverage they think they have in order to try to get to some sort of deal. Yeah. I think it's very, very important to understand one thing. Neither side can pursue the humiliation of the other in this situation. If they do, they're just digging themselves deeper in a hole. Both sides need to be able to construct some sort of a narrative that allows them to exit this war. In that sense, however unlikely or, frankly, lunacy it may sound when I say this, but Iran and the United States are in some ways in the same boat.
Yeah,
They will
true.
either sink together
Yeah.
or they will roll to shore together.
That's a really interesting insight from Frida. And, I, as an American, critical of my own government, I'm looking at this from the perspective of Iran has every right to respond how they do. But it is important to see the escalation cycle as a two agency process, right? And that now, like, I hesitate to put a lot of responsibility on them because that's the energy that Trump is taking to this. Like, it's on them, and if they refuse to accept my terms, they will be destroyed. Well, no, it's not all on them, but it's also they have, because they are seem like they're being the adults in the room, they have a responsibility to stop this escalation cycle at the correct point for them. However, like he just got done warning us that the window for that to happen is narrowing, and this could snowball out of control. This could escalate to a global hot war quicker than you can say 2 bits. Like, it's entirely possible. Now, will it? We don't know. I don't think anybody wants that. And we don't. We have so many interactive systems now that could all come tumbling down. But the fact that we have this integrated global shipping, integrated internet of things and people, and global media, global communications, really does change the dynamic of this, and so does the ability to wage drone warfare, and the cost of relentless warfare has gone way down. So that particular aspect is why it could go further, but it could also be a moment where, if the United States is being honest and looking at its personal setup, it's not in a place to wage this war. It needs to really look at how it does stuff moving forward, because they don't have endless drones that they can manufacture faster than they can use them. They have all these interlocking systems of, it's hard to say why exactly the economic waste in the Pentagon happens, except that pork is a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. And once you're the big kahuna, everybody knows you're good for it, and they know that they can charge whatever they want within reason, and then the reasonability changes gradually with time, till the point where you're at the point where, yeah, a box of 50 pencils costs $50 or whatever. But in this case, the ability of folks that didn't typically have the means until recently to wage relentless wars of attrition using high-tech weaponry is something to behold. And the idea that the thought that they started this war just says, speaks to the hubris of that position, that they thought they could, that they weren't looking closely enough at it. But I'll let him finish here.
And pursuing some sort of humiliation of the other side, which was exactly what the US did in the beginning of this war, and sought to surrender Iran, was a huge mistake. It will be a mistake if the Iranians do the same thing. And I want to just say one thing. Remember that the Iranians humiliated the United States 47 years ago with the hostage crisis. That was a huge mistake. It led to 47 years of sanctions, tensions, and eventually war. It would be a huge, huge mistake at this point if they also overplay their hand and don't recognize the right moment to go to the table, but to negotiate an actual good deal, not one of these things that are just aimed at, calming down the markets and prepare the grounds for the next attack during the next weekend or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
I
that's
agree
why
with you,
it's
sir,
so
but-
difficult to see how you reach that Goldilocks moment where the U.S. is not completely humiliated, Iran is not completely, where both sides basically can declare mission accomplished in some way. Because I have to imagine the Iranians don't feel that they've come close to exacting enough pain to serve as a deterrence. And yet, if they do that, then how is Trump going to convince a public that is already really opposed to this war that this was, a grand adventure and that he came out on top?
And add one other element to it, which is even if you find a moment that looks right, you have to recognize that these talks are not going to be like the 16-hour talks that it took or so to get to the ceasefire in June, because that was an unconditional ceasefire. This is going to be more complex. So the actual time that diplomacy may require may be 10 to 14 days in the best case scenario. And during that period, the Goldilocks moment may be lost.
Totally agree, sir. As always, thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank
I'm
you
not
for
sure I
having
feel
me.
better. I'm not sure I feel better, but it's always better.
No one has said that after speaking to me.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Trita.
Thank you.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right.
Okay, well, that was an interesting romp through Warlandia. And you know what? It looks like I'm on point for childcare, dog childcare, that is. And I think that, well, maybe we can find something else to get going.
Didn't have a policy that allowed that to happen legally, so we ended up with the dysfunction and disorder at the border. All of those problems were caused by the anti-immigration policies by Congress, by the Biden administration, everything that led to so many asylum seekers not being able to work, having no legal right to work. These are all policies advocated for by the people opposed to immigration, not by the people who wanted to have a policy that promotes integration and promotes economic vitality within our society. And so from my standpoint, they ignored my recommendations until 2024 when it comes to having a legal process for people to apply. They started doing that very slowly and tepidly in 2023, 2024, and it did work. It did reduce the number of people crossing illegally. The Republicans called it, amnesty at the border, and demagogued it and talked about how they were.
Oh, there's us. What do you know? Here we go.
All right, well, markets absolutely wild this morning. Let's go ahead and start with this one. Put it up there on the screen. Exactly 12
Show
hours,
should be,
President Trump has now
Brendan
intervened
does,
after a
Breaking
warning
Points.
that was issued about potential
'Cause that's the
market
show today.
fallout that would have happened without a Trump taco. Yesterday, they posted that oil prices were no longer the biggest threat to the markets, increasingly clear that bond markets will dictate how President Trump can continue increased pressure in the Iran war. As of 4:30 a.m. ET this morning, the bond market was, quote, now more broken than the energy market situation. The 10-year note yield had hit 4.45%. President Trump had the same conversation as he did April 9th, 2025, when he had paused tariffs for 90 days. Remember all the whole bond market conversation that we had last year. 3 hours later, he postpones all strikes on Iranian power plants. 30 minutes later, Iran denies. The 10-year yield briefly collapsed before rebounding back to 4.38%. Now a clear attempt by the U.S. to contain a brewing bond market crisis, which obviously affects all of the debt. It affects mortgage rates, has huge impact on everything. The bond crisis and reaction that happened after the after the Liberation Day war, that clearly had a major impact on his thinking. Go to the next one, please. We can put this one up there on the screen as we say now. As seen in April 2025, this is what his prediction was as of the very early this morning, that President Trump would have to intervene very, very soon. Could explain the taco. Don't forget that there are also all of these crazy things happening with the oil markets. So again, as of this morning, there was a large plunge. We remain around 9% down for Brent crude oil futures from the high that they opened on last night. However, at one point they were down like 14%, and they erased like half of that because of the Iranian denial that negotiations were happening. So something to keep an eye on. I mean, it's still at nearly $100 a barrel. Like, let's not pretend.
Yeah, 90 bucks a barrel is not a great place to be in. But
yeah, we're about 90 for West Texas. So that's still, I mean, if this lasts a couple of days, you will likely see a reduction. I think that's the analysis I saw in gas. You will probably see it return to like 350, something like that. Depends on how the individual operators are. I'm talking about the national price average. Don't know about the individual states. But clearly, this was bubbling up at the population level, as it should. People are furious. Good example of that was the UN ambassador, Mike Waltz, who took to a CNN town hall, and a younger voter confronted him over gas prices. Let's take a listen.
I'm a waiter at a local restaurant in Queens, a full-time college student who sleeps an average of 4 hours at night and is still thousands in debt. How is a war in a country half the world away, funded by the taxes pulled from my check, helping me in any way?
Yeah, it's look, it's a valid and it's a tough question. I know for certain, and if we just look at the things the president has put in place in terms of housing and big corporations that are buying up whole neighborhoods, the tax cuts that he extended with the big, beautiful bill, the energy policies that we're putting in place to not only make us self-sufficient, but to lessen these dependencies and lower prices, even lowering prescription drug prices. The president's absolutely focused on what you're seeing day in and day out that's affecting your pocketbook. At the same time, as commander-in-chief, he has to weigh the risks and make the tough decisions, facing some hard truths. We cannot have a world with a genocidal terroristic regime that holds not only your generation, but the next generation hostage with nuclear weapons. And those are the tough calls that the American people elected him to make. And I can tell you, having worked very closely with him, he doesn't back off his red lines, and he doesn't enter us into bad deals. But those are tough decisions, no doubt, and I know they're top of mind for the entire administration.
Yeah, how do we all feel having listening to that?
Oof.
How's that waiter feel? How's that guy feel? The guy who's thousands of dollars in debt and now getting crushed. He's like, how exactly does this affect my life? That's a great question, man. And that's why I always love the town halls. People have a real way of just getting right down to it.
Yeah.
And every American should be asking that question right now of this administration, and specifically of the Iran war. You could not care, you could check out, you're still gonna have to pay more at the gas price, which Joe Biden found out the hard way during the Ukraine war.
And not only him, by the way, I mean, when inflation spiked around the world, basically there was like a total global sweep down of almost every incumbent. I mean, it was a massive global referendum on that, that inflation. And that all started with gas prices. I'm thinking about that gentleman in particular. He's talking about he's a waiter, right? So probably, tips are a significant part of his income. This is somebody who would have seen a benefit from the no tax on tips provisions, very likely, that President Trump signed into law. There are some other tax provisions they were really counting on that would be like, oh, this is going to be our sales pitch for the midterms. People are going to get more money back from the government when they file their taxes. Obviously, that's going on right now. My parents are getting like a senior credit that I'm sure Sagar was really excited about having been put into the tax code. But now that money, that's going right back out the door and into your gas tank. And that's just the beginning. Because, of course, with our economy structured the way it is, that fuels inflation across the board. And, I hope that gas prices come down a little bit this week. But the other dynamic that we experienced during the, Ukraine war and COVID inflationary spikes is that they're very quick to raise the prices takes a little bit longer to bring them back down. They like to hold them high as long as they can get away with it. So I have no doubt we'll see that dynamic here play on as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, remember, diesel came down. Did anybody's grocery price come down? Because I haven't seen it, all right? Let's go to, I know people like my McDonald's updates. So my wife wanted McDonald's. I went to McDonald's yesterday. Medium fries, $4.50? $4.50.
That's great.
What should that cost you? To me, 99 cents. Right?
I'll give it $2.
Maybe it's been the 90s.
You know,
I don't know.
Maybe I'll give it $2.
Again, I don't eat McDonald's, so it's one of those things where this is literally my only. And yes, I did use the app for all the people who were got mad at me for not using the app. $4.50 for a medium fry. What the hell is going on?
Listen, I have the luxury of being able to take a principled stand against the app, but I am against the app because they will track you, they will hunt you down, and demand you go and eat a sausage biscuit or something.
I used it one time.
I don't need that kind of temptation in my life.
And now all of a sudden it's just like, hey, you want a free sausage? You want free this? You want free that? I'm like, well, it's not. Well, is it really free? It's not free if you're paying $4.50 for a medium fry. I can post a receipt if anybody doesn't believe me. But to that point, let's go ahead and put C7 up here on the screen. Inflation coming to a gas station and or a grocery store near you. $5 diesel already crushing truckers, will soon be felt across the economy.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking story.
These poor guys,
man. Yeah.
I mean, these guys, they're like barely floating on the margins, and they're talking about this 40% increase month over month in the price of diesel. If they say that they have to take lesser loads, that they have to drive in weird ways to avoid hills, that if they have a single blowout, that if they have an engine problem, their entire business is done. This is like the backbone. This is the, what is it? I think it's the one profession left in the US where you can reliably not have a college education, make like 6 figures, actually control your own destiny, especially if you're an independent contractor, if you save up enough to have your own rig, and you can take jobs, as you.
And keep in mind, this was the base. This is Trump's political base, the working man economy. The truckers and so forth. It's and nothing against them whatsoever. They honestly were sold a false bill of goods, and they were scammed. And they're starting to realize that they were scammed. You can't say that you're going to bring stability and bring the economy back and then utterly take a sledgehammer to the economy with your policies because you don't actually understand the business as much as you convinced everybody else you did,
Please, you have a little bit of work-life balance, even though it kind of sucks, obviously, to drive as much as they have to do, but they make a modest amount of money and they can generally survive. So, of course, that's also, as I understand it, the most MAGA 6-figure profession in the United States. So, yeah, literally screwing your own voters. It's not just about who they vote for. I mean, it's an incredibly tough job, and it's the last bastion of some agency without, signing up for a life in front of a computer. So I really feel for these guys. 40% increase month over month. I mean, how many business? We run a business. If our costs went up 40%, yeah, I mean, we survive, but I'd be like, you start to make a lot of decisions, right? There's a lot of stuff that's going to start getting cut, and especially planning for the future. So I really do feel, for these truck drivers.
And this gets passed on to consumers. And they talk about in this article about, they interviewed this guy, Miguel Caveda. He says he spent $1,800 in diesel fuel during a 1 week on the road, and that was a 40% increase from what he normally does. And he recognizes, he's like, yeah, I know this is going to get passed on ultimately to consumers who are going to pay more for everything that I'm hauling because, that's the way it works. It's not like the companies that are more profitable in the, the middlemen here are going to take the hit. No, they're going to push it down to the truckers who are in less of a position of power, and they're going to push it on to consumers. That's what's going to happen. People are going to get squeezed.
Yeah, exactly. And keeping here with a little bit of this, we can show you guys some of the stuff. So for example, C6, this is where we're at now currently. This is the nationwide gas price as of this morning. This was about $3.95 a gallon is the nationwide average. It'll probably hit 4 before coming down in a couple days if the downturn continues. Obviously, who knows with the whole Trump taco Israel situation. But I mean, in California, it's $5.70 a gallon. That's madness. And our producer Griffin tells us in Los Angeles, it's easily $6 a gallon. San Diego, a few other places in the state of California. So I really do feel for all those people. And what is the White House telling us? What are the conservative media, Fox News, and others saying? It's short-term pain for a long-term gain. C5, let's take a listen.
This is a short-term disruption for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
We're going to have some short-term pain with long-term gain.
Short-term pay for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain, yes, but we've got some long-term gain. Short-term spike for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain for American consumers.
Is this basically the conservative version of 2 weeks to flatten the curve? Is that what this is?
We may have to deal with that in the short term.
Short-term and temporary.
Temporary, short-term pain.
It's going to suck in the short term.
Some short-term pain.
Short-term pain. We have to focus on the short term.
Memo went out.
The memo's out. That's the Fox News line. The boomers are like, yeah, you're right, for short term. They're just, sitting on their stock portfolios and their new Social Security checks. They're like, oh, if it costs more to drive to the casino to piss away my Social Security stack, so be it. That's the long-term gain. Just, have you seen that meme too? About it's like the year is 2030. The boomers will tell us, you were right about the Iran war and the Iraq war, but this time Turkey is an existential threat to the United States.
Yep.
It's coming. They'll learn nothing.
Yep.
They'll learn absolutely
No, that's absolutely right. There's one last piece here that I just want to flag, C8, because I thought this was interesting, this kind of like time limit of the short-term pain, I guess. They're saying that these Wall Street analysts and these corporate executives basically feel like there's like a 2-week time limit here. The economy has a Strait of Hormuz deadline for Trump, 2 weeks, where, already oil prices have been pretty high, up to $100 and beyond. Right now, they're back down at about $90 a barrel, still not great. But in any case, even Trump expressed surprise at like, oh, how come I thought it would actually be a little bit worse than this. There are some indications they may be directly intervening in the economy to keep the oil prices from completely spiking out of control. But you can see this as a concern. That's the whole reason for the taco right before the markets open this morning, et cetera. But in any case, this is kind of the sense on Wall Street is like, all right, we'll give them about 2 more weeks. If you can't get the Strait of Hormuz open, that's kind of when we're going to lose hope that an achievable taco is truly on the horizon. So, according to this article, at least, that's kind of how the clock is ticking right now.
Well, we'll see. All right, let's. Turning now to some very troubling escalatory things that were happening before the so-called Trump taco. Again, let's not forget that it may not be a real taco. Let's start with B1. Let's put this up here on the screen.
Now, before this even gets going, Israel is not ostensibly supposed to have nukes. Like, that is a state secret. Everybody knows that, obviously. It's kind of like Area 51 or NSA standing for no such agency, right? Like the American drone network, the American drone program, I think has not even officially been recognized. Like, there is no official program, right? Like, obviously that's not the case, but like ostensibly on paper, these are secret negotiations. These are secret facilities, or these are facilities that don't exist. So bear that in mind here. Especially considering that the rationale for this war with Iran was ostensibly to reduce their access or eliminate their access to a potential nuclear weapon, when the world will not even recognize that there is a openly genocidal terroristic actor on the scene that does have nuclear weapons. And it's not just the United States.
Very strange situation with a alleged strike on Diego Garcia.
Attempted strike,
yes, sorry. An attack on a base 2,500 miles away from Iran. The Wall Street Journal saying it signals more aggressive military posture for the regime. Iran brings Europe into range with missiles that were fired at Diego Garcia. We have a map just to show you all exactly how far away and the distance that it would be. It would be the longest IRBM that has happened so far in the war. A lot of people were using it as evidence of why we had to attack Iran in the first place, because it's like, oh my God, look at these madmen. They have long-range ballistic missiles. But there are still some very strange indications around the entire attack. Let's put B2 up there on the screen from the NATO Secretary General. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says, quote, "The alliance cannot confirm Israel's claim that missiles targeted Diego Garcia were Iranian intercontinental ballistic missiles." The other thing to note is that you really are not exactly aware of the leak, because you have Israel allegedly claiming the strike from Diego Garcia. The Brits have been very cagey about it. There's been some anonymous leakage that happened to Reuters and a few others, and people are taking it as fact. Now, you could take that explanation a variety of ways. It could be the Iranians don't want to acknowledge the strike on Diego Garcia because, like they said, it would show some of the powers that they not previously had said that, had not previously indicated that they have. I'm not really sure why that would be. I would want to claim it if I were them because it shows a credible amount of deterrence, strength, ability to strike Europe if they wanted to, but maybe they don't want to yet open, the box whenever it comes to that. The second part is somebody else did it. You can surmise who exactly would want the war and all of that widening. And the third option is it wasn't a missile, it was a drone or some other sort of alleged attack. Or the fourth, I guess, is that absolutely nothing happened. Remember, there's still an information blackout. We have no satellite imagery. We basically know nothing in the last 5 days or so, unless it came out of Israel or Iran. In the Gulf and everywhere else, even though there's still been attacks, the video is dried up to a trickle. They're threatening to prosecute people for tweeting out videos. So that Diego Garcia one, you might have heard it. Be very cautious with that claim. There is not any real evidence yet that it's actually happened.
So, that is really important to say. The only evidence we have is from the U.S. saying that this occurred. We have no other evidence. There was no strike that actually hit the base. You had one, this is their claim, one that allegedly failed halfway and another one that was intercepted. The Iranians are saying this was not us. That's their claim. And the reason that there's a good cause to be skeptical is because this has immediately given a propaganda talking point to proponents of the war who say, see, the Iranians were lying about the limited range of their ballistic missiles. See, Europe is at risk. Don't you see how we can't believe these people and we have to take them out because they pose a threat to all of the Western world? That's what Bibi immediately began pushing. All sorts of, pro-war influencers in the U.S., they all began pushing that talking point. And when you have this, this NATO dude who is a total Trump sycophant, even saying well, we can't actually confirm that it came from Iran, that to me was the biggest red flag of I don't know that this really even went down at all, let alone went down the way that they're claiming it went down. So in any case, possibly Iran has this longer missile range. That would be a very significant development. Or possibly this is all effectively a ruse to provide more justification for a war that is extremely unpopular and to help to cajole the European allies to get in the fight where they've been somewhat resistant thus far. So that's the reason to be really skeptical of these claims until we have anything, more approaching definitive proof.
And the reason why is that things are not going well for Israel right now. And there's every reason in the world to actually want to continue to justify the propaganda effort against Iran. Let's go and put the next one up here on the screen. Let's put B3, please. This was a very significant development that happened over the weekend. Iran said that the U.S. and Israel had attacked the Natanz nuclear facility. There actually have been a very limited amount of strikes, ironically, on the nuclear facilities across Iran. They said that the Natanz enrichment complex was targeted this morning. We don't yet know what any of the actual damage would be. They said, quote, there was no leakage of radioactive material that was reported and no radioactivity material was released. Previously had been targeted by Israel in the 12-day war. Now, the reason why this is very significant is because immediately what followed were massive Iranian strikes in Dimona, where Israel's secret nuclear program is alleged to be. Let's go and put some of the video up here on the screen. I mean, this is shocking stuff, right? Not only do you see a ballistic missile just striking deep inside, you also can see multiple instances of interceptors that were failing, not nearly the number of interceptors that originally are launched at some of these ballistic missiles, and you can see the direct strike that happened that was able to penetrate the missile defense systems in Israel. It was immediately followed up by, and let's go to B.
That was an interesting video, in the sense that, it's kind of, it looks like a mirror in reverse. It's is the sky reflecting the ground? But what seems to be happening is some sort of interceptor going up, but the missile coming in goes way faster, suddenly goes into like almost hypersonic in order to hit the target and bypass the counter offensive, and bypass the interceptor. So that's an interesting technology point.
5 here, where Trey Yingst over at Fox News reported a mass casualty event in the city of Arad in Israel, where at least 100 people were injured. Let's take a listen.
Right now we're here in Arad, where last night an Iranian ballistic missile slammed into a residential area. You can see the amount of destruction here. At least 100 people were injured, according to first responders. You can see the buildings here that were on fire. There is destruction for blocks. Right now, first responders are still combing through the debris, ensuring that there are no unexpected.
Now, the big question I'm asking is why is he being allowed to post this? Is it because it shows the destruction of a residential area, which, so fucking ironic after they just destroyed Gaza. But, that's probably, the reason we're seeing this video is because it has nothing to do with some kind of secret facility and everything to do with them doing cry bully shit.
Loaded ordinances as Israeli officials arrive here at the scene to survey the damage.
So there you go. That was the report there from Trey Yingst, who was on the ground. I think the two of these things we could take. First of all, the missile that allegedly struck in Dimona, that missile appeared to show some evasive maneuver near the end. This was according to some independent analysis that I saw. That would be some of the more advanced weaponry that the Iranians continue to have. And so what can we take away from that? So they have the ability to target a secret nuclear facility. It's exactly tit for tat. You strike us, we strike you. We're able to penetrate your air defense. We're actually saving some of our more advanced missiles, which you claim 95% have all been wiped out. If you combine it with the alleged Diego Garcia attack, you actually would see a much stronger Iran from where we are when in the last, let's say, 2 weeks before, which would validate some of the analysis that we've heard here on the show about how they had sought to wipe out interceptor stockpiles and then reserve some of the drones and some of the ballistic missiles to target very selectively. And they have the ability to secret nuclear facilities, specific bases, Patriot missile batteries, THAAD interceptors, like any of these places, which are very pinprick strikes, but designed to inflict maximum damage and to deliver a major strategic message. So that's why I think these are very important. Israel very clearly is in a hurt position right now. They do not want to be in a place where their nuclear facility or their cities are taking strikes where they even had to issue an apology to the population in Iran, being like, the interceptor didn't work, we're sorry. I mean, this is not what you saw in the opening days of the war, and it's clearly a sign of desperation. We know for them, I mean, the whole Genghis Khan quote, from Bibi and all that, like, you only know which way that's going to go in terms of their own response. They're going to say, okay, we have to have a total war. And try and drag the U.S. into a ground invasion.
Yeah, that's exactly right, which is why it's important to keep in mind, even if Trump does want to taco, it's not only Iran that gets a say in that, it's also apparently Israel. Let's go ahead and put B6 up on the screen. This underscores your point about the messaging coming from the Iranians.
By the way, if you weren't aware, taco stands for Trump always chickens out. And now, of course, it's a verb to taco. It's crazy. That's not the craziest thing about the world now, but that is one of the craziest things now.
They're claiming for the past 3 weeks, our operations were maneuvers to explore the weaknesses of Israeli air defenses. Today, we control Israeli airspace. No one can intercept Iran's missiles. I mean, I think that's, obviously bluster and over the top, but it does appear that as their number of launches have kind of declined to a lower steady state, they're able to inflict more damage. So more of their missiles are finding their targets. Now, also important to underscore, they did not actually hit the nuclear facility in Dimona. Was that intentional? Was it meant more to just send a message of, hey, this is something we could do if we want to. Look how close we're able to strike. Or did it miss its target? That's open question. But, the other thing that I think is really significant here in terms of the Israeli.
It looked like and this is purely speculation, it could have been heading there, and then the interceptor went up and did its thing, but it took evasive maneuvers, went super fast, might have given up its prime target to just hit anything.
Sagar, is there has been lockdown censorship in Israel about showing some of the damage and showing, these missiles in the sky, et cetera. Now you had, Trey Yingst there on the ground. You had Netanyahu touring some of the damaged sites, talking openly about the level of casualties, et cetera. So there has been a shift in their propaganda approach, which I think is also really noteworthy. And you have to ask, why? What made them decide that they're going to acknowledge some of the damage that has been inflicted and acknowledge some of the civilian casualties? And we'll get to this later. We'll hear more from Netanyahu later about, like, oh my God, the civilians, which is just, to hear that man pretend to care about civilian life is just beyond disgusting. But I do think it's interesting to know. And some people are saying, well, what are they preparing for? What are they trying to prep the ground for by acknowledging these, strikes that did in fact inflict civilian damage and inflict, casualties on civilians there within Israel. So I think that's...
See, she called it out. Basically, yeah, the reason they're showing those strikes is because those involve civilians, which again, yes, super ironic. And almost disgusting. Like, bring your barf bags to the, session where you have to listen to Netanyahu talk about fucking civilian deaths and just weep,
It's another important piece of
Yeah,
this
I
deal.
mean, we're setting the stage here for our eventual conversation about Bibi later on in the show, because obviously he's making crazy claims. They're trying to widen the war. By the way, just came across the wire, despite Trump's taco, the Israeli Air Force has begun a wave of airstrikes against Iranian infrastructure sites.
Against Israeli infrastructure sites?
Israel has begun a wave of infrastructure targeting in Iran, literally after the Trump taco. So almost an hour later, the Israeli Air Force is striking Iran. We know that.
Because they had struck their infrastructure
last night as well, and saying they're continuing again this morning. Just to keep everybody, sorry, the show, everything is moving fluid.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, this is why, Trump loves to play this game, and I do think it's the same game as what Biden would play with Israel too, of like, oh, I'm so mad at Bibi, blah, blah, blah. And over again, we get the same thing. And Trump plays the same game. And so, look, it's possible Israel's freelancing, but I think it's more likely that there's a coordination here where Trump wants to keep his hands clean, but still allow the damage to be inflicted on Iran to keep the pressure on and, sort of manage the escalation by pretending that he's innocent of whatever the bad Israelis are doing. And, oh my gosh, I'm so mad at them for doing this. But, I would be surprised if they didn't have some sort of green light, or at least not a red light from the U.S. in these type of attacks.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows exactly what's going on. All right, let's get to oil.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.
Meanwhile, while we're on taco watch, we have to continue, of course, to pay attention to the thousands of U.S. ground troops that continue to move to the Middle East. And we have Lindsey Graham trying to set expectations for everybody here, taking to Fox News Sunday and saying not only should the United States take Kharg Island, but comparing it to the Battle of Iwo Jima. Let's take a listen.
Here's what I tell President Trump. Keep it up for a few more weeks. Take Kharg Island, where all of the resources they have to produce oil. Control that island. Let this regime die on a vine.
Is this going to, though, take Kharg Island? Is it going to involve U.S. troops on the ground? Let me just read you something from The Atlantic. Does an assessment on that. They say U.S. troops may well take Kharg Island. We believe in their ability to do so, but only to endure ballistic missile strikes, drone attacks, petrochemical smoke, all without a reliable means of obtaining logistical support. The result could be a grinding war of attrition. They talk about how far away they would be from resupply.
I'm sort of tired of all this armchair quarterbacking. This has been an amazing military operation. God bless the fallen.
But it's a difference when we talk about troops on the ground.
I trust the Marines, not that guy. I trust DOD. We got 2 Marine expeditionary units sailing to this island. We did Iwo Jima. We can do this.
We did Iwo Jima. We can do this. Anybody want to tell me the casualties on Iwo Jima? We got about 7,000 killed and 19,000 wounded. Is that the...
Oh my God, Lindsey Graham is so horny for this war. It's ridiculous. Like, ladies, find somebody that looks at you the way that Lindsey Graham looks at this war. But maybe not. He's a little fucking intense. Talk about a stalker vibe, right? Like, oh my God.
Similar stakes that are involved here in the middle of this expeditionary, adventure, chosen excursion. Yeah, it's not even a war, it's an excursion. That's what Iwo Jima, is being floated. I think this is the perfect clip to show you how these individual Marines are just pawns on a chessboard to people.
Yeah, and they won't declare it being a war, but they will use metaphors from the last great war, as it said, to sell it. And it's just so fucking ironic.
In Washington, that they use the mythology of the heroism of the past to whitewash all of the ways in the post-World War II era that their lives have just been carelessly thrown into these wars of choice and adventurism, which accomplished nothing to the benefit of the United States, bled us dry, blood and treasure. And meanwhile, the individual families who either lost somebody or...
And incidentally, we are instigating this, like in the World War II, we were stopping others from doing imperialism. In this case, we are doing the imperialism overtly and directly. We are not the good guys in this world war, guys. This is something you really need to understand.
Have somebody wounded or whose family member was affected by PTSD, they have to deal with the wreckage. That's why this bothers me so much. Like this bravado, chest thumping. Each one of those individual lives who was lost on Iwo Jima is not fodder for you to then claim some of their glory in order to advance your regime change war of choice, which has now been a total and a complete disaster. And I think it
will have an input over whether or not we go to war. Again, that's even to the extent that Congress is required now to declare war, that has reduced greatly because of the influence of the unitary executive theory and the march of the U.S. president into greater and greater levels of Caesarness. So.
We talked with Professor Pape about the parallels, Karg Island or the Straits of Hormuz, and we're talking about Gallipoli. These are like global changing events. The Aussies still remember Gallipoli. One of my tour guides, when I did a World War I battlefield tour, 100 years later, the descendants still come to Gallipoli to see what their great-great-grandfathers had to go through. I don't think we should be going about that. I think we should do everything in our power to avoid some sort of a nightmarish situation. And this is the problem, is that they're so caught into this mythos. Everything is always World War II. That's why, what do they say about the Iranians? What does Mark Levin in there? Oh, they're not.
Yeah, the blood sacrifice trope is really powerful, and especially with the Lindsey Graham sort of fanatical, and I want to say evangelical Christian and Zionist in general, both Christian and Jewish, this blood sacrifice trope, the most iconic scenes that everybody remembers are also the bloodiest. And that's to some extent human nature. What they will tell you is human nature. I would say that that's within this window of the last 1,000 years or two of human society, last 3,000 or 4,000 really, but human beings have existed on this planet in this current biological form for hundreds of thousands of years, and I can't stand anyone telling me that what is here and now has always been the case or will always be the case with humanity, right? And so, we also have the evidence now, the direct evidence through the Epstein files, that these people worship power and they worship bloodletting of various kinds, through Bohemian Grove and these kinds of things. Documented cases of the elites that run this global society, quote unquote society, sacrificing children, and war. The regular bloodletting of violent warfare is a part of that. It reminds me that in the Civil War, I believe the Gatling gun was developed. It was done so You know, because the guy wanted to end war. If you made it so obscenely, cartoonishly ridiculous and mechanical, people would just stop. But that actually led to the World War I situation that Sagar is describing, and the mechanization of destruction and wholesale slaughter of human beings. So it's like the guy was like, "Hey, this is so ridiculous, it'll end war," and the world is just like, the elites are just like, "Bet," and like, let's do this. Okay, cool. Well, next evolution of humanity is just this: we are ants to be used in the machinations of the queen. But yeah, interesting stuff, and very the historical connections. This is the point of studying history, so that we know we have some context when the world does stuff we didn't expect.
Nazis, right? Everybody's always a Nazi. It's always 1938. It's always either Munich, and our enemies are always Nazis. There's no, there's no in between. That's the only conflict that you're ever allowed to talk about.
Reminds me, which Iranian official was it that posted online, like, Americans remember well when General Westmoreland came and said things were going right. We're like,
it was Arachi, the foreign minister.
Yeah, it's Arachi.
He said, Americans remember well General Westmoreland. And I'm like, sir, I wish we did.
You are vastly overestimating us, I'm sorry to say, sir.
Sir, I wish that were the case. A lot more Americans should know General Westmoreland's name, one of the most villainous military figures in U.S. history.
There's a handful of historical events that you could count on. Maybe most Americans remembering or having learned about. That's definitely not one of them.
They don't make Saving Private Ryan movies about General Westmoreland. Again, literally one of the biggest liars in U.S. military. The most villainous military figure
we like to sweep
history.
that one under. Those don't get approved by the Pentagon, script people who look at the scripts for Hollywood. Yeah, I mean, this is sick, and it's just.
LeMay, General Curtis LaFucking-May, motherfucker, butcher of Tokyo. Anywho.
Disgusting, and it's also really important because this is not just some senator, unfortunately. This is a guy who was extremely influential in bringing us to this point of war. There was I believe Bloomberg did some digging into, like, how the hell did this happen? And, the Mark Levins of the world, the Ted Cruz came out and also said he was really pushing in this direction. I don't know if that's true or not, how influential he was, but he's like wanting to take credit for this right now for some reason. So you had a handful of voices, here in the US, and then obviously the Israelis, very influential as well. You had these media personalities too. And then, you had Trump high in his own supply after Venezuela, and all those things came together to create this horrific, horrific set of circumstances. So when Lindsey Graham is out there talking, he's saying these things directly to the president.
Exactly.
The other thing that I'll say about, the whole setup there is he's dismissing this analysis of like, oh, this is going to be really bad. And he's like, I don't trust them. I trust the Marines. Well, and I trust the military. It's like, well, the military, the ones that tried to tell Trump that this was going to be a disaster. I don't know how forcefully it was done, but they had war gamed this out, years ago, especially the Strait of Hormuz part, and were like, this is not going to go well for us. They saw all of the peril on the horizon, but he thought he knew better and wanted to listen to Israeli intelligence instead of U.S. intelligence, wanted to listen to Israeli war planners instead of U.S. war planners, and now here we are. The other thing I've been thinking a lot about, Sagar, is I really was resistant to this idea that you had of like, we should actually have age limits, but I am coming around to it because when you have these old men,
childless,
men who, not just childless, like Trump is not childless. I'm talking about Bibi, I'm talking about Trump, I'm talking about the martyred Ayatollah, I'm talking about Lindsey Graham. They don't have to live in the world that they're authoring, and they're thinking about, Trump talks all the time about whether he's going to get into heaven or not. Like, clearly he's thinking about his own mortality. I think Bibi is too. Netanyahu is too. And so they're willing to take extraordinary risks with the entire world because their major concern is like, I want to be viewed as this, great man of history, as this, historical figure. And I really think in Trump's case, I'm not sure.
I was just wanted to, like, I love her outfit today. Like, she's the queen, but like also like this sort of like pastel lime green, like almost avocado thing that she's wearing with the button up. That's, man, killing it out here today, Crystal.
He cares whether it's like for good or for evil. He just wants to be remembered. He wants to leave his mark on the world. And he really doesn't have to give a shit what's going to come after, because this man is not going to be on this planet for that much longer. It creates grave dangers. It creates a risk landscape that is truly, truly unacceptable for all of the rest of us. So I do genuinely think it is a massive problem, the way these old men are thinking about their legacy and how they want to leave their mark, versus like, how do I make sure that we are, considering risks appropriately and not ending up in some sort of an insane nuclear escalation.
There's a lot to be said. When we were talking with Trita Parsi, you could tell he is very concerned that the Iranians will make a similar mistake to the US, and that we will not try for some de-escalation, that they will not seize their moment, which will lead to their inevitable destruction. To your point, I don't think it's an accident that the youngest president in American history is the person who got us onto a diplomatic off-ramp, which basically didn't exist during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And, sorry for the history lecture, but like, it is important to think this was a person who literally broke his back on PT 109 and had to swim in the ocean carrying a wounded man, his life jacket strap in his teeth to try and save him. Now, it was kind of his fault in the first place, but whatever. The point that remains is that while he's in the Situation Room, he was a guy who at that time was, low level. I think he was like a lieutenant, and he's sitting across from these generals who successfully fought in the Second World War. And he's like, they don't understand the stakes of like what it actually means to fight and to die in combat. And so for him, it was so important to seek that diplomatic off-ramp and to at least gamble and to try in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the famous responding to the first letter, not the second letter, and agreeing to some things which were anathema to the U.S. security establishment, the removal of Jupiter missiles from Turkey. That is the most courageous act, I think, in the history of the American presidency. It saved the world from Armageddon. I don't really think it's an accident that you had a very young person who was willing to reject the 60, 70-year-old security establishment of the people who are around him. And you can see now very clearly, as it's repeated now all throughout history, yes, these older men, people like Lindsey Graham, people who are, like Lindsey wants his legacy to be total regime change in the Middle East. He has no children and he's in his 70s. Like, this is it for him. He wants a Senate building named after him. There, by the way, unfortunately, the Senate buildings, two of them, Rayburn and Russell, are named after childless old men who their entire life was, the Senate, and that's fine. But like, of course, they didn't have anything to live for. They didn't have to live necessarily in the world of their making and of their consequence. Like, this is really important to the Ayatollah as well. He's 86 whenever he was killed, And yeah, I mean,
although out of all of them, he showed a lot more caution.
He showed a lot of caution,
and his younger replacement is likely to not follow in those
footsteps.
That's
the problem. His caution, he was too cautious to start a war and not cautious enough to avoid one. I actually think he was the worst of all wars. With old people, what do? They dodder and they're indecisive. And I think that's really, ultimately, I really don't think he's very blameless. I think he really made a lot of mistakes, especially in the last 5 years of his reign.
They should have pursued a nuclear weapon.
Right,
we wouldn't be in this right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality. And as much as I hate to say that, because I abhor nuclear weapons, I would love for proliferations to be rolled back. That's just not the reality we live in right now.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Last thing I do want to show everybody too is that before the taco, it's not like the American, establishment.
Back to the thoughts about Libya and Gaddafi and the nuclear program. It's like we don't want nuclear proliferation at all, but like, unfortunately, the way that power works, nobody with power respects anybody without power unless they come to the table armed. And in this world, it means nuclear weapons. That's just, unfortunately, the case of the brinksmanship of they won't take you seriously enough to not start a war with you unless you have that in your back pocket. Russia has that and China has that, but like, thus far, we're just doing all these proxy conflicts. Nobody's directly started a war with those people. Getting closer and closer with each of these scenarios that play out. It's definitely the Cold War Part 2. I don't know if it's World War III properly yet. I think in the future they will say that. I think though, like, you'll have to have superpowers directly going at it personally. Americans shooting at Russians, Russians shooting at Chinese shooting at Americans, not these proxy conflicts. Because in the Cold War, Vietnam, We had the United States going in shooting at Vietnamese, not Chinese, although everybody knows that the Chinese and the Russians were supporting the Viet Cong at that point. That's still in a Cold War territory, properly, right? But the truth is that World War III could break out at any moment in any of these contexts, and it's a miracle, a fucking miracle that it hasn't already. Everything we do in this regard brings us closer. So, that there is that ultimate, and this shouldn't be normal. This kind of like jostling and saber rattling and brinksmanship has real consequences and does, while it doesn't, we haven't provoked ultimate nuclear annihilation of the whole planet yet. We are just willy nilly every once in a while, and ongoing, like in Gaza and stuff, just annihilating whole sections of this earth and whole populations of this earth selectively as punishment in order to exact political or economic retribution. And that's wrong. It's fucking wrong. And that's the system that's propelled our dominance of the global information, economic, military hierarchy since World War II, when we happen to come in at just the right time to not exhaust ourselves before the thing was finished, and thus found ourselves in the superpower position afterward. And then we act like we did so much to save the world in that war, when actually, like, Russia definitely paid a higher price just in terms of lives. It's impossible to measure these things economically because, again, like, bloat is a thing. And so is inflation. But even accounting for inflation, you might have a completely different number output value of what people spend on defense in each location, given economic styles. It's just it's non sequitur trying to apply the two. But certainly, in terms of manpower, Russia lost the most in order to finish that war, and we came in and act as if we get to run the whole damn thing, mainly because of finishing off with the nuclear weapon, which people say, well, that's what ended it. I guess yes, properly so. There's a lot of debate over whether or not we could have ended it at that point already, that Japan was willing to come to the table, and the dropping the nuke had more to do with communicating with Russia our technological superiority before the end of the war, so that we could establish this new reality. But that didn't last very long, obviously. And some people, have said, like, the Rosenbergs and Oppenheimer and a few other people were brought before the House Un-American Activities Committee to accuse them of disseminating the nuclear weapon technology to the Russians. I would say that they're probably working on it beforehand, but that's entirely those. If that's the case, those people were operating under the assumption that no single entity, superpower or anything, should be walking around with godlike power on this earth unchecked. That's just not a power that mortal human beings should possess. And whether or not we needed to drop that to end World War II, there's a whole debate. I would say no. And that's saying that I might not exist were that not the case, because maybe Japan would have held on a little while ago. We would have had to send in ground troops, one of which could have been my grandfather. And he might not exist, then my mom wouldn't exist, and then I wouldn't exist, right? Coulda, shoulda, woulda. This is what happened. This is the world we're living in today. But whether or not that should give us the power to hold on to the reins of the entire economic system, the Bretton Woods Agreement, and so forth, basically all of the moneyed interests of the world, and the dominant system. These events are, almost predictable, and being used by the Iranians, by the Chinese, and by the Russians to slowly ebb American power. And we're at the point where every time there's one of these serious imperialist flexes, that we have to do to impose martial law on the world, to enforce the status quo as we see it. They know it's inevitable that we do these things. And meanwhile, as we do them in such a predictable fashion, each time they are being used by our adversaries to erode our power, our economic standing in the world. Because of the hubris, because of the inability to look at the way we've been doing things, and the stigma placed on anyone that tries to do anything different with the American system, with the Western so-called capitalist system, and the inability to check ourselves, the inability to really take account of the crimes and the various untruths, mistruths, lies that we've told about the world and our role in it and our right to police these things, and we deserve everything we're getting at this point. It's not to say I dislike America. I'm an American and I'm a patriot, but that's what it means to be a patriot. So in a democratic society, being a patriot means you question your government at every turn, no matter who's in charge of it. If they do crimes, always look at what they're doing versus what they're saying, and checking words versus actions in any case. I hold no sacred cows over here. I'll let Sagar finish up.
Wasn't sounding very, very bellicose. Let's put A9 here, Secretary Scott Bessent, who is somehow the war defender on television this weekend, saying sometimes you got to escalate to de-escalate. Take a listen.
We are taking out their missiles, their missile systems, and the factories that build those missiles. And now the General Kane, Secretary Hegseth, are leading a campaign to destroy all the fortifications along the Straits of Hormuz.
Just to put a fine point on this, though, is the president in the process of winding down this war or escalating the conflict?
Again, they're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you have to escalate to de-escalate, Chris.
Sometimes you got to escalate to de-escalate. Do not forget, as they covered on the Friday show, A10, put that up there on the screen, that you just had American officials telling their counterparts in Israel there may be no...
Is that like the opposite of, that's the direct opposite of you got to go back to go forward? But you got to go twice forward to go one back, you guys. That's what you got to do,
choice in order to launch a ground operation to capture Karg Island. There could be various other schemes and plots that are afoot. There's another 2,500 Marines, let's put that one up there on the screen, that are currently on their way. They're not even going to arrive for 3 weeks. So this really could be a delaying action. You've got 2 of these Marine expeditionary forces that are on their way to the Middle East. The one that's coming from Asia, they said it would take 2 to 3 weeks. That was about a week ago, so it's still on track. And this one, I think, also has to sail from the West Coast.
That would fit the pattern at this point. Delaying, like, oh hey, no, we want to negotiate, you guys. Hey, we're ready to stop. Meanwhile, they're moving thousands of people. That makes the most sense out of anything I've heard so far today. Is the troops aren't there yet. Okay, they're not there yet to physically secure the Strait of Hormuz, to physically secure this island. And so they're doing everything in their power to try and delay the inevitable, delay the crash to the markets that will come when these troops do invade that area. And so again, with the inability to back down, they believe that strength is their inability to negotiate is a strength and not a weakness. They'll be sorely mistaken.
All the way to the Persian Gulf, which is going to take a little while. So we are in no way out of the woods here just yet. I want to make sure that we take that with a grain of salt. All right, let's get on to the nuclear section.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a
All right. Well, there's obviously much more to come. I just wanted to give this a go, and absolutely 0 viewers thus far, and that's okay. I mean, it's really not, but we'll make it work, and just keep doing this. Just keep screaming into the void. Somebody's bound to listen sooner or later. But it's been a nice little experiment in audio video technology. And appreciate you tuning in if and when y'all tune in. And have a great day. Stay strong.